Hello, everyone. My name is Reese Karlinski, and this is an episode on what's happening right now in Nigeria and why the big ol' US of A is involved. So, on Christmas Day of 2025, the United States President Donald Trump announced that there would be a set of airstrikes launched onto the northern part of Nigeria, specifically the Sokoto province, because that area is filled with Islamic extremist groups, mainly Boko Haram and its splinter cells, and that this attack was being done by the US to defend Christian groups from targeted attacks. The claim from the United States, the right-leaning side, and the president are that Christian groups in Nigeria are facing direct attacks and direct targeting and all of that, so the U.S. is now directly involved in this. The reason for these attacks is what I'm going to go into, and the history of why northern Nigeria is in a place where it's dealing with what is known today as the world's most dangerous group of this kind. Boko Haram is the group that I mentioned before that is now an extremely violent group of terrorists working in the northern Nigerian provinces, in Sokoto and ones neighboring it, and they are the biggest reason for what is happening today in northern Nigeria. So this group was founded by Muhammad Yusuf in the early 2000s, initially as a non-violent group, and emphasis on initially. They were a group that were led by Muhammad Yusuf's thoughts that Muslims living in Nigeria are not living the right way and that there is too much Western influence in Nigeria. The reason he came to power and came to influence was because of his teachings. He was the equivalent of a pastor in Islam, and he has taught all these things which lean very heavily towards very traditional Muslim beliefs from Islam, and they are very anti-Western. They're very focused on jihad, the struggle for Islam and the struggle to maintain the religion of Islam. He believes all those things, and an overall anti-Western teaching and mindset is extremely important to Nigeria, and his hope was to kind of create a northern state in Nigeria that was ran by and for people who share his beliefs, which are very traditional Muslim beliefs that are notably different than what Nigeria represents in its government. Right around 2002, Muhammad Yusuf's teachings started to gain a lot of traction, and his movement gained followers. His movement shifted from more hands-off belief that things should change, that there should be a state, to more hands-on. He started calling for the implementation of Sharia law and started to call for things of that sort, very anti-Western, Sharia law governance, things like that to be instated in Nigeria, and he wanted to do this again by having his own province in northern Nigeria for people like himself. The Nigerian government caught wind of this and wanted to put an end to it quickly. They put heavy restrictions on all the movement, teachings, and expression of Boko Haram, and because of this, the group was heavily suppressed. But this didn't put them down. From 2003 to 2008, the group started to become violent. They started to train up a militia with the hopes of taking down Nigeria, with making a big move against Nigeria to make their point and get their movement to gain real teeth and real traction, because they saw that it didn't work in the way they initially thought, which is that it would just be accepted, that Nigeria would be able to accommodate this, but this has not been the case. So from 2003 to 2008, Boko Haram becomes similar to what it is today. The 2009 uprising. In 2009, Boko Haram finally made its move. It had been building a militia for a lot of time, and for the past 5 years had been training and getting ready for this day in 2009, when they would make an actual move against Nigeria to form an Islamic state within the northern parts of Nigeria. From the state of Bauchi in northern Nigeria, they launched a direct attack on Nigerian provinces, military bases, and strongholds all over the country. This was very deadly, and people died on both sides. Then Nigeria's military and special forces, special defense forces of sorts, all got involved and were able to subdue Boko Haram. The Nigerian government, military, and special forces all caught wind of this and cracked down heavily on Boko Haram. They launched a full defensive effort that turned offensive as a way to push Boko Haram out. They were able to stop the grandest part of the attacks that really swept across the northern part of the country and had the most deadly influence. However, they didn't get rid of everyone. Boko Haram still found its way to have strongholds in the north in places like Sokoto and Bauchi, and would still launch operations from here. But during this 2009 uprising that was hoped to be the biggest move for Boko Haram, they lost their greatest asset. Muhammad Yusuf was captured and taken into police custody in this year. Now, as time would go on, Muhammad Yusuf would actually die in police custody under very unforeseen circumstances that were also very shady in the eyes of Boko Haram. Because of this, Boko Haram was now emboldened. They had a bigger fire under them that became more radical, and this was most heavily emphasized by their new leader. Abu Bakr Shaku succeeded Muhammad Yusuf as the leader of Boko Haram and turned them into the deadliest terrorist organization in the entire world. Between 2010 and 2015, Boko Haram has been committing suicide bombings, kidnappings, enslavement, and rampant attacks. In this 5-year period, it has resulted in the death of at least 30,000 people. The leader, Abu Bakr Shakau, has completely changed the culture. He is praised within his group and has been upheld by that group because of his unwavering beliefs. He refuses to bend even the slightest knee and will not rest, in his eyes, until the real Islamic State in Nigeria is established. He really does take to heart the meaning of Boko Haram. Boko Haram, literally translating to Western influence or Western education, is illegal. And he is the reason that this group has done the things it's done. It is now at a point where they're so violent and emboldened by Shakau, and they were in this time, that they didn't even do coordinated attacks. It's just indiscriminate. It's attacking left and right. It's kidnappings. It's suicide bombings. It's all sorts of things like that that have completely gone global and have caused so much trouble for Nigerians, to the point where 2.2 million Nigerians have been displaced since 2010 to 2015 in that 5-year period. In 2014, under Shakau's leadership, Boko Haram kidnapped 270 plus schoolgirls from a Catholic school and used them as a bargaining chip. This gained global attention. Nigeria called out for help, and many countries wanted to come help them. Despite this, this was good for Boko Haram in their eyes. Boko Haram and its members liked the attention this got. The leaders started to encourage more kidnappings and more events like that, incidents like that to happen, because it got so much attention on Boko Haram, and they were very interested in just sending a message through fear rather than anything else. This also gained attention from ISIS, the Islamic State of Syria and Iraq, which has, for the last decade and a half, plagued Africa, Europe, and parts of the Middle East. These two groups worked together for a time, Boko Haram and ISIS, and led to many different kinds of attacks. This led to an increased number of events happening, incidents, tragedies, all of those under these two working together. But there was a split that happened not long after. Boko Haram is a group that prefers, as I've said, very indiscriminate attacks. They prefer sending a message through fear, killing many people, and they prefer doing what they want whenever they want without a coordination that is emphasized under the leader Shekau and is their way, compared to ISIS, which does a lot more coordinated attacks with the goal of bargaining, with the goal of sending a message to get to higher governments to negotiate for things that will benefit them, and this didn't click with Boko Haram. Because of this, there was a splintering within the group. The group within Boko Haram that led more towards the ISIS style, which is the coordinated attacks that have led to so much both controlled and uncontrolled chaos across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa over the last decade and a half, those split into ISWAP, the Islamic State of Western African Provinces. That's the group that leans much more loyal towards the ISIS style, compared to the other half, which stayed loyal to Shekau within Boko Haram. They stayed loyal to Shekau and prefer his style of more indiscriminate, very violent, very uncoordinated, uncontrollable attacks. And that is the group that is known in some areas as the JAS, or to us, Boko Haram. On top of the endless human lives that have been lost because of all of this, there is another cost. Businesses are closing. Children aren't going to school. The areas that are being attacked are not making any money and not developing in any way. People aren't doing anything they want because out of fear of Boko Haram or the ISWAP groups attacking. This area that has already been very poverty-stricken throughout its recent history, the last few decades since independence, is now being pushed even farther. All those issues are being exacerbated by the fact that Boko Haram is present and stopping the growth of anything. A lot of these areas rely heavily on foreign aid, which is now even slower to get to them if it makes it there at all because of the attacks from Boko Haram. Boko Haram continues to suppress these people and isolate them from the things they need and keep them living below the life they deserve. But because of this, the fact that the Nigerian government is not stepping up to help these people, the fact that the world is not stepping up to help these people, a lot of them are becoming radicalized. Young people are being drawn towards the Boko Haram side, both out of fear and out of lack of other choices. They know their government isn't helping them. They know there isn't someone coming to save them. So their mindset of, if you can't beat them, join them, does start to come along. And within these people is this fear that pushes them into these extremist groups. If not Boko Haram, one of the many others that lie in that region of northern Nigeria and all the other countries that region touches. Boko Haram and its splinter groups have committed acts of terror and violence and caused absolute tragedies since 2009. They've affected groups across all races, religions, and more in North Africa. Yet, however, in late 2025, a claim was led mainly by the U.S. President Donald Trump that there has been a direct targeting of Christians in northern Nigeria and that the U.S. had to do something about it. This claim undermines something huge, which is the fact that this northern area of Nigeria is mostly Muslim, and the main people affected, killed, and displaced by Boko Haram and its splinter groups are Muslim or Native African, or believe in some animist religion that region has dozens of different kinds of because of the long, complicated history of Nigeria. That was a place before colonization that had countless different people groups believing countless different things. Christians are affected by this. The greatest attack, I should say, that has happened to the Christians in this area was that kidnapping in 2014 where 270 plus schoolgirls were taken away from their church and their home and used as a bargaining chip at best and used for much worse in truth. The United States got directly involved in this conflict in December 25th of 2025, Christmas Day, when just the day before, a suicide bombing happened. But where this happened was at a mosque. The people affected and killed in this were Muslims. Yet, despite the facts not adding up, Donald Trump and the far-right evangelical Christians of the United States and that part of his base he's been able to rally, as well as those in government that rally behind him, have said that the U.S. needed to get involved in this because they needed to protect Christians, and different people like Nicki Minaj and other people who have those beliefs and have that mindset started to preach about this, and it started to roll the movement even faster so that Trump was not only encouraged to do this, but now had support for the decision he was already going to make, which was to get the U.S. involved in Nigeria's politics directly by airstriking them. At this point, right around half, or just under half, of all Americans believe that the U.S. should avoid interventionism and focus on domestic problems. But despite this, these airstrikes still occurred, directly tying the U.S. to Nigeria's government and getting us involved directly in a conflict they've been dealing with for 15 years. Now, nobody is on the side of Boko Haram or the people in those groups that are doing these awful acts, but the justification for the U.S. intervention is not true. Trump has rallied his base around this, citing directly the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. Now, this act does cover countermeasures as part of the U.S. foreign policy if they're done to protect religious freedom around the world, but it is almost never cited. The numbers not adding up doesn't change the fact that this is very serious, that there are real human people being affected. Now, if the United States were to lead a coalition, to lead something to embolden Nigeria to do this, and do it for the sake of everyone, not just for a group that isn't really the target of all these attacks, there would be more validity. There would be more backing for it. There'd probably even be international backing for it. But right now, the United States is just flexing its muscles and getting involved in a conflict it does not need to be involved in, especially while it deals with another conflict that started just after this, which I will be acknowledging soon. We're talking about Venezuela. And all of that while the U.S. deals with domestic problems, which most Americans agree is the main thing we should be focusing on, because we have our ties in foreign policy, and we have way too many ties internationally to wars and to alliances that aren't feeding us right now. Now, you can feel how you want about different things, but you can't deny the U.S. is over-involved in the world in places it's not wanted, this being one of them. Because there was no cry for help. There was no we need the U.S. It was the U.S. saying we're going to do this, and the Nigerian government bending the knee and being complicit. And the biggest thing with this, to me and to many Americans, is that it's a distraction. All this is going on while the United States Department of Justice is facing heavy pressure to release the Epstein files. These are the files that contain infinite logs about probably the worst child human trafficking seen in the history of the world and definitely in the United States. And the president of the United States is heavily complicit in all of these files. So right as his name starts to pop up in these files, the 1% that us Americans were given by our government, his name pops up 600, 700 times. And with this, he starts to do things. And this has been his calling card over and over throughout different parts of not just this presidency, but his first one. When things are getting hot, he says, look over there. He says, we're doing this thing, so they could try and sweep what's under the rug in the United States. In this case, it is the worst thing humans can do. It is one of the worst things that humans have ever done is what's in that list and in those files, and this is a distraction from that. But I will leave more of that to you. What's important to focus on with this is these things, and this is where I'll wrap up. What's happening in Nigeria is horrible. What's happening because of Boko Haram is sickening. There are millions of people being directly affected. 2.2 million last decade and even more since. And that's not counting all those that are literally gone from this world and not counting all the billions of dollars that are no longer available to flow through that area of Nigeria because of the fact that this area is paralyzed with fear. Yes, there needs to be awareness about this. Yes, there needs to be a call for help. There needs to be something done to actually stop this group from advancing. But dropping a few bombs and then going back to the U.S. and closing your eyes and distracting Americans from what we're dealing with right here, which is just as criminal as anything else happening around the world, is not what needs to be done. If the U.S. is going to be the big good guy of the world and start being the good police again, then there's a whole long list of people we need to deal with before we start popping our nose into different areas that were not wanted or invited. But with that being said, I will leave the rest to you. That is one guy's opinion after a whole lot of very objective history. But that's all I have for you guys for now. I do appreciate you listening, and I do hope you look more into this. This is one of the most tense humanitarian crises in the world right now. That region of Africa is dealing with a lot between Nigeria, Sudan, things happening in southern Niger, and conflicts starting to break out even in Eritrea and Ethiopia. That whole central and central western region of Africa is going through an incredibly tough time right now, and there is no greater humanitarian crises that are getting such little attention as those in Africa. So I encourage you to follow along with me as I start to cover those and dive deep into sources now to learn for yourself. Because just because they're halfway around the world, you should follow the money and see if it is your tax dollars causing some of these things, because it could be if you live in the United States, and it also could be that a lot of this started because of something your country did if you're in Europe or something of the sort. So please continue to do this stuff, continue to look into it, continue to learn, because this is people's lives that are being affected around the world. And this isn't just cool history to look at. This isn't just something to learn about and close your book. It's something you should be educated about so you go into the world to try and make it a better place without people like this that cause these things. I'm young, 23. I can't run for office for anything right now. But one day, me and people like you will age into that, and we'll be the change that needs to come to this world, to each of our individual countries, so that all of us can come together. And it starts by being educated so that you know what's going on in A, B, C, D. So when everyone comes to the table to talk, you don't think they're making things up. You don't feel distance from them. You feel connected to them, because these struggles are not Nigerian struggles. They're human struggles. So we all need to come together to understand what's going on so that eventually we can make the world a better place. So with that, that's all I got for you. I'm very happy with the way I ended that there, so I'm going to leave it at that. And truly, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like this, please actually like it down below, and please subscribe. I'm going to have both the podcast and everything else I talk about history on down below, and I truly do hope you guys enjoyed. So thank you so much for this, and I hope you have a good one.